So one or two specifics. Our image sharing solution, PACS Connect, good buy-in from clinicians, and we're helping to really radically improve the time it takes, particularly in trauma, stroke, to share CT, MRI, PET scans between clinicians. And it has a major impact, as you'll appreciate, on patient care, let alone cost. The final example that I'd probably use of what we're doing is something that is massively personal to me, and that is the work that ourselves, Tesco's and Bupa and others are doing to support WizKids, the children's wheelchair charity. And we, along with others, have helped them build their process model to really deliver on their vision of getting a child in a chair in a day. And also at the same time take 50% of the cost out of wheelchair provision. And that, I must say, I'm really proud of. So there's some of the specific things that we're up to at the moment.
Great. Rick.
Thank you, Martin. And good afternoon to everybody. My name is Rick Hutley. I'm the Vice President of Global Innovation from Cisco Systems, and I'm over from Silicon Valley. Unlike my esteemed colleagues here, I am not directly involved personally in the healthcare industry. I deal with innovation across all industries. Now, Cisco is involved in healthcare, absolutely, both directly and indirectly. Directly, we have a healthcare practice, we have healthcare products, rather like yourselves, everything from remote telemedicine with our Health Presence solution, which is a high-end high-definition video capability that allows doctors and practitioners to provide service from anywhere in the world. But at the other end of the spectrum, we provide the mundane capabilities, the router that sits in your home or your patient's home, or the router or switch that sits in the hospital or wherever. Because to me, healthcare really is a social condition. It occurs wherever people are. And in today's society, it really is about connecting people and connecting information and providing that ability to bring things together across the various networks of the world. And that's the business that Cisco is in, connecting people as they travel around in their cars, connecting them when they're at home, connecting them to their doctor, their dentist, or the grocer. And so I would say that we're in every aspect of healthcare, including supporting all of our colleagues here on stage.
Well, great. That sets the scene. I'm sure you'll be thinking of questions that you might want to put to any of our panelists, or indeed to the panel as a whole in just a few minutes. But let me first of all ask Jim, you know, we've got innovations that are represented on the platform here, some of which you have picked up and have adopted. We've got this terrific exhibition, which is just the tip of the iceberg of the innovation that is out there, that is going on in this country. And I just wonder why a lot of the innovations that are out there that are ready to be adopted now, why you're not doing it now. What's the logic behind that?
Well, and there is the question, and I think it's a complicated answer. So because I sort of think about it all the time. I think there are some good reasons. I mentioned some of these before. I mean, I think healthcare is a conservative business, and for some innovations, that's the right thing. You know, it's right that we do proper long-term clinical trials on toxic drugs before we ask people to take them. So, yeah. but that culture infects the rest of the chain in terms of we then have a slow view of what represents change. I think we are complex, and I think one of our problems is we're trying to go from, I do upset people when I say this, but a sort of a weaving shed kind of model to sort of mass customization in one go without the whole of the Industrial Revolution in between, and it's a big challenge. We're trying to catch up a lot in that time. There are definitely cultural and bureaucratic obstacles inside the NHS.
I thought those are being tackled. I thought that, you know, we heard from Lord Howe about how we've got a really great efficiency team in place to speed things through.
Yes, they are. And there are, sorry, Mark, they are. And I also think some of our systems work against it in terms of the way price works. Really, it's great talking to WizKids. I mean, WizKids is a great example of a service that offers immediate benefits, but it doesn't quite fit with the funding model, and so it doesn't get put in place, and so the tail is wagging the dog. And I do think that we, I mean, I include me, are relatively risk averse. You get punished quite a lot for failure in the NHS, and one of my industry colleagues said at the dinner that we had last night, which I hadn't heard before, and maybe you have, which I thought was very powerful, which was that a culture of innovation is also a culture of failure. And we are pretty heavy-handed about failure, and so I think we've been much better at raising minimum standards, the bottom end of the curve, than we have about liberating innovation at the top end.
Is there any way of getting over those obstacles, of dealing with them one by one, so that you can have a more efficient system in place? And if so, what would be the time scale for doing that?
Well, I think what we're trying to do is not have a debate about which of those is, but trying to attack each of those, get a tariff system that supports change. The whole point of the Secretary of State's reforms is to open up people at the front end of the service in terms of quality and innovation and accept some failure. As a result, we're obviously working through events like this to kind of create a culture of energy and excitement. So we're addressing a sort of broad front of responses. How long? I don't think I know the answer to that question. I do think it's not something that you press a button and it happens.
Can I ask each of our panel if there's any one thing that you think would make the partnership between the private sector and the NHS stronger? I mean, the one thing that you would like to see from your perspective. Jackie first.
I think what I would really like to see is we have an amazing relationship with the clinicians, so the forefront, the people who deliver the therapies. They're absolutely convinced that a lot of the devices and the therapies that we bring to them will help patients, will reduce waiting times, will reduce stay, are more minimally invasive. That is understood by our clinicians. What I think the challenge is, and I think it's understood by the higher level of the NHS, certainly all of the managers in NHS understand that. It's how do we get that embedded in the NHS culture, because often an upfront cost of a relatively expensive device will save money in the long run, but we're such short term at the moment, and we're looking at individual costs, and that doesn't seem to be, there is a definite disconnect. So I think that is our biggest challenge. How can we unlock the value of our devices to really make an impact on the system?
And Clay, from BT's point of view, you were talking about, 3 years ago, you were a totally different organisation. You've made all the changes, so you presumably can see quite clearly what the NHS needs to do to make itself a better partner for the private sector.
Yeah, and I think it's both. It takes both of us, but we've got to find a way to get much more engaged in some form of risk share, where it allows us to bring the new ideas to get to market more rapidly. So there's lots and lots of great ideas within the NHS, as we mentioned, but standardizing, figuring out which one is the idea for a particular domain, and then partnering up with the big guys, coupling in some of the small players, and just driving it home. It takes us far too long to go from idea and concept and pilot to scale. Where it falls apart is between pilot and scale, and I think there's got to be some form of risk share that goes within that, and that's how we drive it forward.